Hey seniors, for the last week or so we've been working on solving equations, and particularly we've been solving linear equations. Today we're going to talk about writing equations from graphs and slope-intercept. So these are going to be the same kind of equations we've been working with, but we're going to put them on graphs now. So go ahead and draw your line, and go ahead and write writing equations from graphs and slope-intercept in the top left-hand corner. The first thing that you need to know about slope-intercept is that this is the equation that you are always going to want. Y equals mx plus b. Write that in your notes. This is the slope-intercept equation. And you are going to need to know this equation for the rest of this unit and all through high school. So make sure it is on your paper. All right, so when I talk about slope and intercept, let's go ahead and talk about some vocabulary terms. The first is slope. And the slope is essentially how much a line on a graph increases or decreases, which is the same, the slope is the same as the rise over run. And rise is always how many points a graph moves up or down. So rise is up or down. And then the run is how many spaces a graph moves left to right. So make sure that you have the definition of slope written in your notes. And then my second is my y-intercept. And the y-intercept is where the graph crosses the y-axis. And this is always your starting point when writing equations or trying to figure out the slope of a line. So make sure that both of these are in your notes page. Pause the video if you need to, but these are both super important. Let's move on. All right, in order to, that should say write an equation from a graph, the first step that you need to do is identify your y-intercept. Again, find out where the line hits the y-axis on the graph. The second is to identify if the slope is positive or negative. And that just essentially means if I look at the graph, is the line going up? If the line is going up, the slope is going to be positive. If the line is going down, the slope will be negative. Our third step is to find two good points on the graph. And the fourth is to determine the rise or the run between those points. And remember, the rise over run is the same thing as finding the slope. So again, make sure you have these first 4 points down on your notes page. Don't worry about the rise and the run down here since we already went over that in the slide before. Let's move right into an example. All right, so again, if I want to write an equation to find the slope of this line, the first thing I need to remember is my slope-intercept equation, which is y equals mx plus b. My second step is to find the y-intercept. And the y-intercept is, again, where the line crosses the y-axis. And if I look at my graph, again, my vertical lines are my vertical line down the middle is my y-axis, my horizontal is my x-axis. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and label that, x and y. And I'm looking for the point where the line crosses the y-axis, which is at -2. So I'm going to go ahead and write next to y-intercept, -2. So my next thing is to find the slope of the graph. So I'm going to find two good points where the line hits the graph. So my y-intercept is at -2, and I also see that it hits it where x equals 1. So again, if I want to find my rise over run, I need to figure out how many points it goes up and how many points it goes left or right before it hits the graph again. So I look and I see that this graph increases by 2 each time. So I know that my rise is going to be 2 and my run is going to be 4. So I have 2 over 1, which simplifies down to just 2. So my slope is 2x. if I want to write my equation, again, I just take these two things, I plug them in slope-intercept form. So my equation is y equals 2x minus 2. So again, all I did was take my slope, take my y-intercept, and plug it into the equation. So this is my equation. And again, I know that the slope of this line is positive because my line is going up. Let's do another one. All right, so again, we're writing the equation in slope-intercept for the following graph. Again, I'm remembering what my equation is, which is y equals mx plus b. I want to find the intercept, the y-intercept, and the slope. So let's start with the y-intercept because that's always my starting point. I'm looking for the point on the graph where the line crosses the y-axis. And again, I'm going to go ahead and label x and y so I don't get mixed up. And I see immediately that my line crosses the y-axis at 14. So I know that my y-intercept is 14. My next step is to figure out, is my slope going to be positive or negative? Again, your slope is the steepness of the line through the graph. And I see that my line is going down. So I know that my slope is going to be negative. So now I just need to figure out what my slope is. So I need to figure out my rise or my run. So I need to find two good points on the graph. So I see that it hits it at y equals positive 14, and it also hits it at 1 and 10. So I'm going to put a dot there. So now all I need to figure out is my rise over run. I see that my point decreases by 4 and goes over 1 spot. So my rise is -4, my run is 1. And that's going to simplify down to just -4. So the slope of my line is just -4. If I want to write my equation is going to come out to y equals -4x plus 14. And all I did there was plug in my y-intercept for b and my -4 for m, and then of course x stays the same. Let's do another one. If I want to find the slope of the following graph, again, all I'm looking for here is the slope. I still have to figure out what my y-intercept is. So where does the line cross the graph at the y-axis? So I'm looking at my line and I see immediately that it's pointing down. So I'm going to look for the spot where it crosses the y-axis. And I see that it crosses it at -4. So my y-intercept is -4. My next step is to find another solid point on the graph, and that happens at 1 and 1, -2. So I'm going to put another dot there. And I just need to figure out my rise and my run. Well, this graph is going down, so I know my slope is going to be negative. So I'm going to go ahead and put a negative sign. And I see that it decreases by 2, and then it runs by 1. So my rise is -2, and my run is 1. -2 divided by 1 is just going to give me -2, so I have a slope of -2. That's going to be it. All right, so again, when you're doing these, figure out what is my y-intercept, because that's always your starting point. Then find 2 points on the graph, figure out what your rise and your run is, and remember your rise is the slope going up or down, and then your run is it moving left to right. All right, guys, that's going to be it for me. Let's go ahead and practice.